You mentioned the PM being overseas at the moment or on his way. Some 14 missiles hit Kiev overnight. Should the Prime Minister go on to Ukraine after the NATO summit?
Well, Pete, if it's safe for him to do so, then yes, I think he should. As you know, as Defence Minister, I provided $280 million worth of support to the Ukrainian government, and I had a couple of video calls with my then counterpart, the Defence Minister in the Ukraine, and they were incredibly grateful for the support that we were able to provide as a country. And I think the bond between the Ukraine government and people and Australia now is unbreakable, and we want to see Russia excluded from the Ukraine as soon as possible and allow the reconstruction to start. And I think leaders, including our Prime Minister, standing alongside President Zelensky sends a very, very powerful message, not just in Europe but around the world. And if it's safe for him to go to the Ukraine, I'd support that very much.
Zelensky wants more weapons though. He wants more vehicles, more howitzers, more ammunition, drone jammers and comms systems are all on the wish list. How much of that can we realistically provide?
Well, there's a lot that we can provide, and there's also a lot that we can provide not just from the stocks that the ADF might have available to them, but also directly from some of the manufacturers that we have relationships with. So there is a lot that we can do, and I would support the Defence Minister and the Prime Minister in any decision they took that was based on the advice from the Australian Defence Force to give that support, because we don't want to see the Ukrainian people wiped out. We don't want to see the attacks on schools and buildings and apartment blocks that result in, women and children and men dying at the hands of the Russians. It's an abomination, and we should do whatever we can to stop it.
Would we not be leaving ourselves short in some areas though, if we needed them? Well,
as I say, you take the advice from the Australian Defence Force, and we provided support on the basis that we had sufficient stocks, or we could source directly from one of the suppliers. So the government will weigh all of that up, and no, we can't leave ourselves short, but there's no immediate need. So the risk assessment is quite different than if there was an imminent need for us to deploy troops, and I suppose you never know when that might happen, but the reality is at the moment that's not something that is in contemplation, and Defence will weigh all of that up. But it is a good thing that Australia provides support to the Ukrainians. I think it really stamps our authority as one of the leading nations in the world. I think it also means that when the rebuild is finished in years to come, when the Ukrainians can get back to their life, their geography is not going to change. They're going to be a very significant military power in Europe for decades to come, and the bond now between our two countries, as I say, is unbreakable, and they will be a very important partner and ally in international fora for decades to come. And I think we should be very proud of the groundwork that we've laid over the course of the last 6 months or so, and that we will continue to do into the future.
You were part of a government that led to a rift with France. How does it feel to see the new Prime Minister heading to Paris to try and mend those relationships, to fix it?
Well, Pete, we welcome that. France is an incredibly important partner and ally, and we've had troops that have died on their soil protecting and defending France. So it's always a bond that is two-way, and we want that to be as strong as it can. But we made a decision in relation to AUKUS that was in our country's best interests, and of course that's the responsible action of any government, of any minister, and I would expect nothing less from the current Prime Minister and Defence Minister. But the AUKUS deal meant that we had a security underpinning and assurance for our country for the next 40 or 50 years in a way that wasn't possible before. And unfortunately, the French were always going to be upset at a breaking of that contract, given the amount of money involved. But it was in our country's best interest. I make no apologies for that. And of course, our intention, had we been re-elected, would have been to re-engage and to mend the relationship with the French. And I'm very happy that the Prime Minister's doing that, and we'll give him every support. Yeah.
Do you think Macron was still playing up the outrage a little for a domestic audience?
Well, look, France was going into an election shortly after the announcement that we made, and they're through that election now. So there's a different dynamic and a different atmosphere in which you can have these conversations. And as I say, the relationship's too important to be defined by one issue. We've got many decades of experience and bloodshed and conflicts that we've fought alongside the French, and they're an important ally in NATO now. They're a very strong voice in Europe, and obviously President Macron, to his credit, along with other European leaders, have been speaking out against the actions of the Russians in the Ukraine, and we strongly support them in that stance.
Okay. Opposition Leader Peter Dutton coming to us live from Perth this morning. Thank you for your time, Peter. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Pete.